Chapter 10. No to Witchcraft. A powerful revelation I found was that witchcraft cannot be released against the obedient. When a person walks in obedience to God, witchcraft has no power over him. Satan is confined to darkness, so he has no access to us when we are joined with God, in whom is no darkness at all. Jude 1:6. And the angels which kept not their first estates, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. 1 John 1:5. This then is the message which we have heard of him, and declare unto you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. The effects of witchcraft are obvious in our society. Though subtle, they are no less real in the church. This teaching will address when a believer is protected against witchcraft and when he is not. Blessing, not a curse. During their wilderness journey, the children of Israel camped on the plains of Moab. They had just attacked and defeated Bashan. Earlier, they had destroyed the Amorites because they would not allow the Israelites to pass through their territory. Now, as they camped in the midst of Moab, Balak, the king of Moab, and Midian, was worried. His kingdom quaked in fear at the multitudes of Israelites. They knew Israel had destroyed every nation that opposed them. So King Balak sent word to the prophet Balaam. Balaam was renowned for his spiritual accuracy and insight. The king knew whatever Balaam prophesied happened. If he blessed, they were blessed. If he cursed, they were cursed. After receiving 2 sets of ambassadors, Balaam consented to accompany the king to see if he could curse the children of Israel. He had been won over by the king's offer of money and honor. But Balaam warned the king that he was restricted to speak only the words God placed in his mouth. The next day, they climbed the high places of Baal, so Balaam could observe the nation of Israel. After Balaam had assessed them, he instructed the king to erect 7 altars and prepare sacrifices for each of them. Then Balaam opened his mouth to curse Israel, but instead he pronounced a blessing over them. Needless to say, the king was very upset. Numbers 23:11. And Balak said unto Balaam, What hast thou done unto me? I took thee to curse mine enemies, and behold, thou hast blessed them altogether. So Balaam suggested they move to a higher level in the hope of giving Balak what he wanted. Again, they erected 7 altars and offered additional sacrifices. But when Balaam opened his mouth, he again blessed Israel instead of cursing them. This entire process was repeated 2 more times. Each time Balaam attempted to curse, but was compelled by God to bless Israel. In Balaam's second oracle, we find this profound statement. He has not observed iniquity in Jacob, nor has he seen wickedness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox, for there is no sorcery against Jacob, nor any divination against Israel. Numbers 23:21-23. He hath not beheld iniquity in Jacob, neither hath he seen perverseness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brought them out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of an unicorn. Surely there is no enchantment against Jacob, neither is there any divination against Israel. According to this time it shall be said of Jacob and of Israel, What hath God wrought? Israel walked in covenant with God. His mighty arm had delivered them from Egyptian oppression, symbolizing freedom from this world system and power. They were a forgiven and cleansed nation, baptized as they passed through the Red Sea. God said he observed no iniquity in them. Balaam declared that because of Israel's covenant with God, there was no sorcery or divination that could prosper against them. You could also state the principle this way. There is no witchcraft that works against God's people, nor any divination against his church. We should encourage ourselves with this promise. Let the witches and warlocks rant, rave, and burn their candles. Let them recite their hexes, spells, and curses. Not one can harm a child of God. They will not prevail against the church of the living God. Proverbs 26:2. As the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse, causeless, shall not come. Numbers 23:8. How shall I curse, whom God hath not cursed? Or how shall I defy, whom the Lord hath not defied? Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the rebellion of the workers of iniquity, who sharpen their tongue like a sword, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, bitter words, that they may shoot in secret at the blameless. Psalms 64:2-4. Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers of iniquity, who whet their tongue like a sword, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, even bitter words, that they may shoot in secret at the perfect. Suddenly do they shoot at him, and fear not. Curses may be released against the righteous, but they will not rest upon him. Watch what happens to those who release curses. Psalms 64:7-8. But God shall shoot at them with an arrow. Suddenly shall they be wounded. So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. Notice they stumble over their own tongue. The very words they release to hurt others will circle back upon them. In another metaphor, David explained it this way. Psalms 57:6. They have prepared a net for my steps. My soul is bowed down. They have digged a pit before me, into the midst whereof they are fallen themselves. Selah. Even if Balaam had pronounced curses over the children of Israel, it only would have returned upon his own head. Balaam knew it was impossible to bring a witchcraft curse on God's people, even though he wanted to. Moses later reminded Israel, Deuteronomy 23:4-5, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way, when ye came forth out of Egypt, and because they hired against thee Balaam, son of Beor, of Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse thee. Nevertheless, the Lord thy God would not hearken unto Balaam, but the Lord thy God turned the curse into a blessing unto thee, because the Lord thy God loved thee. Numbers 24:10-11. And Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he smote his hands together. And Balak said unto Balaam, I called thee to curse mine enemies, and behold, thou hast altogether blessed them these 3 times. Therefore now flee thou to thy place. I thought to promote thee unto great honor, but lo, the Lord hath kept thee back from honor. The king was planning to give Balaam a great monetary reward and honor for cursing his enemies. But in essence, the king told Balaam, you can forget the reward. Your God obviously doesn't want you to have it. So get out of my sight. Balaam and Balak, we read an amazing thing. Numbers 25:1-2. And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. And they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods. And the people did eat, and bowed down to their gods. And Israel joined himself unto Baal-peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. What happened to this nation that had served the Lord? The book of Revelation says that Balaam, Revelations 2:14, but I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. Numbers 31:16. Behold, these caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to commit trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. I can just picture the scene. Balaam really wanted the king's money, so he said to the king, I can't curse them with my mouth or any other form of divination, but I can tell you how to get them under a witchcraft curse. King Balak said, How can it be done? Balaam said, Send your women and have them infiltrate Israel's camp. Have them bring their idols with them as well. This rebellion will bring them under a witchcraft curse. Israel's disobedience caused a nation that could not be cursed to come under a severe plague. Numbers 25:3. And Israel joined himself unto Baal-peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. Numbers 25:9. And those that died in the plague were 20 and 4,000. This was the greatest single loss Israel experienced in the wilderness, and it was all a result of their rebellion. Radical disobedience opened the door to a radical plague. Their rebellion was so blatant that one Israelite man openly flaunted his sin with a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and the entire congregation of Israel. So what stopped the plague? You may have guessed. Radical obedience. Numbers 25:7 and 8. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent, and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. Allow me to point out that God is not the author of plagues and diseases. The children of Israel had blatantly rebelled and breached his covering of protection. The door was opened, so the enemy came in with his curse. Once again, this affirms that rebellion is witchcraft. It gives legal entrance to Satan's control. Israel escaped the curse of a soothsayer only to be decimated by its own disobedience. The Apostle Paul wrote a stern letter to the Galatians. Galatians 1:2. And all the brethren which are with me unto the churches of Galatia. Notice this letter was addressed to the churches, not the general populace of Galatia. Paul chided, Galatians 3:1, O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you, that ye should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ hath been evidently set forth, crucified among you? God had revealed his salvation by grace to these churches by Paul's preaching, but it was not long before they began to disobey what once was clear to them. They turned to follow another gospel, one of works. Galatians 3:16. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds, as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. However, this specific act of disobedience is not what I want to focus on. What is important is the fact that God had clearly revealed his will to them, and they turned from it to following the reasoning of another. This reasoning bewitched them to the point of confusion. Paul warned this church that they were under the influence of witchcraft. Some may question, I thought there was no divination or witchcraft against God's people. That is correct. No curse can be released against the obedient. But remember, rebellion or disobedience places a person under witchcraft. Now let me make this point clear. We come under bewitchment when we disobey what God has made clear to us, not when we disobey what has not been revealed to us. What they disobeyed had been clearly revealed to the Galatians.